Darkcast Network. Come to the dark side of podcasts. We have cookies.
Cookies? Me love cookies.
Is Mothman really a supernatural force predicting impending doom? Did Apollo 11 really land on the moon? Did you find out if that was a cult living just 2 doors down that you waved to every single day when you got your mail? If these are things that you ponder when you should be sleeping, then I would like to welcome you to Creepy Confidential. I'm your host, Noelle, your resident weirdo Wisconsinite. I open case files on my favorite cryptids, cults, conspiracies, and other worldly creepy, bringing you new cases, live broadcasts, and local lore. Some stories have been lost with time. Others are perhaps still happening today in your local communities, right under your very creepy noses. So get ready, creeps. It's Creepy Confidential.
Devil is on his way, motherfucker, the devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees, devil is on his way. Fall to your knees, devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees, devil is on his way.
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
We say fuck a lot.
Hey, y'all, welcome back to Mountain Murders.
I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
Hey, Dylan.
Hey, Heather.
We're just cruising through the month of August.
Where did the month go?
Summer is ending.
Yes.
The end is near.
Yes, many parents rejoicing around the country right now. It's back to school time.
Back to school time, absolutely. I've noticed the mornings feeling a little cooler out.
Yes, fall is in the air.
It's going to be around the corner. Hiding, waiting.
I can't wait. You know, and that's our transition from it being too hot to it being too cold. So you got those a little 4 or 5 weeks or so?
Absolutely. I can't believe we're here.
Yeah.
Summer's flown by. Where's time going? And we talk about this all the time, but I really do feel like time is flying. I'm losing track of days. I don't know what month it is. I just checked. I'm like, okay, it is August. Gotcha. Dylan, I have to share something with our listeners.
Well, go ahead.
I was at the airport yesterday, and I saw a guy, and I swear on your life, it was a young Ed Kemper.
Okay. So he
looked like he stepped straight out of a 70s true crime magazine.
So you told me he looked like Mindhunter Ed Kemper.
He looked like Mindhunter Ed Kemper, but he had these massive mutton chops.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just these massive mutton chops. Super 70s look about him. Like he was decked out, had the 70s attire on. Tall dude. And looked just like fucking Ed Kemper. And I saw him across the airport, and my immediate reaction was, I need to get as far away from this guy as I can. Now, I'm not saying he was Ed Kemper, but he looked so much like him, it freaked me out.
So he was big and everything.
He was huge.
Wow.
Like this guy had to be probably 6'5".
So I got, you did confuse me because you were telling me about a creepy guy and the Ed Kemper guy at the same time.
Yes.
So to clarify for myself mostly, the Ed Kemper guy just looked like Ed Kemper, but he was chill.
Yeah, I didn't have an interaction with him.
But he seemed okay. You weren't getting, I want to screw your neck
I don't know.
hole.
He was just standing there.
Okay.
He might have wanted to screw a neck hole. I don't know.
But
all I'm saying is dude looked just like Ed Kemper. And it was so weird. It freaked me out.
But can you tell the listeners about the creepy dude?
Oh, well, yeah. So I'm back at the gate. I take my son to the airport yesterday. He was flying back to Michigan. I'm at the airport gate. we're at the Delta gate with him because they do let me accompany him to the gate.
Right.
And we're like waiting for the flight. And this guy, I was like, man, this guy is like molesting me with his eyes.
You said he was, well, not to be crude, but he was eye fucking you.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Every time I would look or like glance around, you know, because I'm like people watching, which I love to people watch at the airport.
Gosh, the
I
best.
saw Ed Kemper.
You're right.
Right? So I'm like people watching at the airport, right? And every time I would like glance over or make any kind of eye contact with this guy, he'd be like giving me the look.
Wow.
You know the look.
Oh, I know.
Like if he were a chihuahua, he might be humping my leg look. Well, I will admit, it's been a while since a man has gazed upon my body in such a way.
Yeah, I believe the last time was this really big black guy at the gym,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not noticing these things.
Yeah. Anyway, hey, call me, sir. No, this guy was like kind of lurchy.
Oh.
Like he maybe could have doubled his lurch in the Addams Family. I don't know. Right?
So the creepy guy's big too.
He was like a big gangly dude.
Oh,
He was
gosh.
wearing an MIT t-shirt. So, I mean, at least maybe he's educated. I don't know.
Yeah.
But he was just like gawking. And then I would just look away and look back and he'd still be staring. So then I was like, you know what? I'm going to make eye contact back with this dude.
Oh, gosh.
So then I made the eye contact and I was thinking, okay, now he's going to look away, but he didn't.
Oh, he was
then
like.
he's kind of like raising his eyebrows
No.
at me like, hey.
Did he literally do the eyebrow thing?
He did.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh.
And like smiling and
Yeah.
like, you know.
He's like, this is working.
Yeah.
He's probably went to one of those alpha male classes. You know what I mean? Where you can do with like what was it, Anthony Tate or whatever?
Andrew Tate.
Andrew Tate. And he's learned how to become an alpha. And
A pickup artist?
he's reeling you in. I mean, this is working.
It did not work. Okay, Ed Kemper has a better chance of getting me in the trunk of his car.
Okay.
All right? No. So around the same time that this eye contact happens is when my son is boarding the plane.
Yeah.
So I quickly say my goodbyes and like leave
Right.
and leave this dude there waiting to get on the plane. And I'm just like,
And see, and people's like, where was Dylan? They never let me go back.
They never let you go back.
So I'm in the parking lot holding it down. This is I wasn't.
I think you're on a watch list of some kind.
I wasn't walking around the airport trying to drink beer. I've done that in the
Not
past.
this time.
No, not this time. It's new Dylan. I must say they just let you walk around with the beer, which I find gosh, invigorating, if you will.
Invigorating.
Last time I had a turkey sandwich and a beer. It was nice, but so yeah, I was just holding it down in the parking lot, watching a little peacock or something, and then Heather came out and told me these great stories about people watching. So there we are.
Yeah, I just had to share the Ed Kemper thing because I've never met someone that I thought, wow, this person looks just like a serial killer.
Yeah.
But this dude did.
Wow, scary. These big.
So hey, Ed Kemper Jr., if you're out there, I done synced you in the line at the airport.
Hey, you know those real big guys are kind of scary. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah,
Because they're so big.
Well,
It's
if
like
they have huge hands.
Yeah.
You just think about Sam Little, and
well,
this guy could probably crush my head with his huge hands.
well, you know, me being the unit, I'm seldom intimidated, but sometimes that happens. You know, it takes a really a freak of nature, if you will, to intimidate me. But I always think, you know, if this guy gets going, you know, it's going to take 4 or 5 of us to them slow him down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, but a big guy like that, hey, I'm coming in low. I'm going to get your knee. Those knees been getting worked all your big, goofy life. And I'm going to chop you down, son.
Yeah, so after I came out, I was like telling you about the Ed Kemper and then the gangly guy
Yeah.
that was staring at me. You thought it was the same. You were like, so Ed Kemper was like, I fucking you? And I'm like, well, no.
Right. That's why I still was seeking clarification. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right. So here we are. It's been
No, here we are.
Yeah, here we are.
Nope, we're not here.
Yeah, we're right here.
I'm over there. I'm not here.
Yeah.
Wherever
Okay.
you go, there you are, Dylan.
See, now I'm confused.
I believe it.
Okay.
I absolutely believe it. We have a very interesting case to discuss today, and it's kind of like a case within a case.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's very strange, and there are some twists and turns that are going to leave you feeling like, what is happening?
It's the Russian doll of podcasts.
It is kinda. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're gonna enjoy this, Dylan. Are you ready?
I can't wait to see what's inside
Oh God.
of you. I mean the podcast.
Okay, Ed. Start calling you Ed Kemper.
Like, I think people's pretty on the inside. Let's go ahead and have a look. Yeah.
I like your organs.
I like your organs. They don't seem abnormal.
I like your pancreas. All right, are you ready to do this?
Let's dive straight in.
All right. On November 9th of 1985, 36-year-old Danny Paquette, who owned a welding business, had a full day planned. Danny liked staying busy and was known to have a strong work ethic, likely instilled by his father, Arthur Paquette. So Arthur had like a dairy farm. So they have like a family dairy farm. And unfortunately, it wasn't enough to pay all the bills. So Arthur would wake up early in the morning to milk the herd. And they could have up to like 100 cows being milked like at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah. Just a massive herd of dairy cows.
So it's not a tiny farm, but it's still not quite big enough to be the only work they need to do.
Right. So Arthur would get up, before dawn to start milking these cows and then would head off to work 8 to 10 hour shifts as a construction foreman.
Man, I got to say, farming's hard. It really is.
You've done a lot of farming in your day, Dylan?
No, I've watched people farm.
You've watched people farm.
And it seems pretty tough. I've known people who look after small herds of cows or, dairy cows, beef cows, things like that. People that had to work a 9 to 5 as well. And there's just a lot of work. You see, the animals don't wait. They can't wait. Especially I've always been kind of fascinated by dairy farms.
My great aunt Ina had a dairy farm, and she had beef cattle. She and her husband, and they actually owned property in several different states.
Okay,
like where they had different, plots of land with herds of cattle. So she lived in North Carolina, in the town where I grew up, and her husband would kind of split his time between like Georgia and I want to say Tennessee, but I could be wrong, but I know he spent a lot of time in Georgia on a separate farm. So they like lived apart, but were married for, 50 years or something.
I think that's what makes the marriage work.
Yes, it did. But my Aunt Anna, she was a character. Like every time she was this old like farm lady, always wore these big old rubber like galoshes, we called them, and would smoke cigars. And she was a hoot. But, she was up there in years, and it was hard for her to do all of the work on the farm, but she still would get out and work like hell. So when I was a kid, I remember going over with my great-grandpa, like almost every evening, and my dad, and we would help her, like, feed the cows.
Do the chores.
And we would put up hay, go feed the cows and all that. So I grew up doing some of that. And it was hard work. But, I really enjoyed it. Like, those are some really good memories I have from childhood, was like spending time on that farm and doing some of those chores.
Yeah, I don't mind good, honest work. And like I said, the animals can't wait. And the milk cows, they have to be milked.
They have to, yes.
They have to. It's not something. So a lot of these things on the farms, you don't choose when they have to be done. They usually have to be done at a certain time. And I always have been blown away when people do that type of work early in the morning and then go work a full-on regular job.
Yeah, like a second career in addition to all of the farm work.
So you're busy every day, all day, every day.
Yeah, you never have a moment to stop. So, it sounds like Danny grew up around his dad, hard worker, mom a hard worker, because mom's also working the farm, and she has a job outside the home as well. Danny was considered ruggedly handsome and a bit of a bad boy around town.
See, I suffer from this same plight. I mean, this is honestly why I can't wear like a leather jacket, because, people are just like, oh my God, there goes that bad boy.
I'm not sure that anyone would describe you as rugged. You have a baby face.
So,
and it's like only now that you're old and have like a graying beard.
Wow.
That you don't have a baby face. But if you shaved your beard, you still have like this baby face.
Yeah, I know.
You got these little chubby cheeks and stuff.
I could be 30 tomorrow.
You're not chiseled. You don't have a chiseled jaw.
So to be rugged, you got to have a chisel, maybe a
Well,
big scar across your face.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, but I've still I've run away. I've tried to shake that bad boy persona all my life. It's true.
Oh, you're cute.
All right. So here he is, rugged and handsome.
Yeah, and he's kind of got this bad boy reputation around town. You know, he rides motorcycles, likes fast cars, and doesn't have any issues attracting the opposite sex.
Yeah.
The ladies like him.
And what that really means is he's going to be a philanderer
He's got a big mustache
and he's going to leave you when he gets you pregnant.
because it's 1985, and he has a Tom Selleck type of mustache.
Okay.
He's got a stash, Dylan. So most recently, Danny had been involved with a newly separated woman named Ruth Celeste, who had recently moved to Hooksett, New Hampshire from western Pennsylvania, along with her 3 teenage sons. And this was only about 6 months earlier. She had moved to town, met Danny, and they kind of instantly fell into this relationship.
So things are happening fast for Ruth here.
They are. Now, on this particular Saturday, Richard Duarte, a friend of Danny's, had planned to stop by his Whitehall Road property to work on a 1951 Ford, or 54 Ford, I'm sorry. Richard had purchased the car from Danny, and Danny had allowed him to store it in his garage while they kind of worked on it together. The two pals had bonded over their interests in cars. These are fellows we would call gearheads.
Okay.
Right?
So often you would find them tinkering with some vehicle.
Yeah, and that's kind of how they met and kind of became friends because they were both into vehicles, cars, trucks.
I wish I had a buddy that was a gearhead. Because I've mentioned it before. I don't care to work on cars. I don't like it. I can do some of it.
You can be friends with my baby daddy.
Well, I wish we lived closer.
He's a gearhead.
Because I need him to work on my car.
He would. He loves it.
Things are so expensive nowadays. I need a buddy who will throw a transmission in for me.
Oh, he would be down to do it.
He'll go find the old one and take it out at the junkyard and bring it and put it in the other one.
Trust me, when we were together, I spent many a Saturday in a pull-apart junkyard.
Pull-apart junkyard.
Where you drive several hours to the different pull-aparts to find car parts.
And he's just like a big kid the whole time. He's just loving it, right?
Yeah.
Digging around in those cars.
Mm-hmm. That's why he's my ex. Just kidding.
Okay.
Okay, so Danny and Richard, they worked on the Ford the night before until about 10:30 p.m. on the Friday night. And Richard stopped by the auto parts before heading to Danny's property. And Danny's property, it's a chunk of property. He's got a house, a barn, a garage, and then kind of a sprawling field peppered with junk cars and what some folks described as artistic sculptures because he's a welder.
Oh, okay.
So he's got a bunch of scrap metal that he's, welded together and has these kind of funky abstract sculptures.
I can really appreciate some of that type of sculpting. I've seen some really interesting ones over the years, Sometimes they're very symmetrical. Sometimes, it's like they'll take a certain part, like nuts or something, and do it in a way that, it makes a designer.
You said nuts.
All right, Beavis. Or I'm sorry, Butthead. But no, and then sometimes it's very abstract. You know what I mean? But I've seen some really cool stuff over the years, like little robots, things like that.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds like, Danny was a guy who, his property was kind of like he just had it the way he wanted it.
Right.
Maybe the neighbors weren't always pleased.
Well, that's one of those places
He's got the junk cars piled up, and
it sounds like one of those places. The more you walk around, the more you see.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're, oh wow, I didn't even see this. And you kind of go exploring.
Yeah. So when Richard Duarte arrived, Danny and Ruth, Danny's girlfriend, were engaged in playful flirtation in the garage. It sounds like maybe they were playing, little grab ass, giggling, he.
He was checking her oil.
I don't know what he was doing, Dylan, but sure. Now, during the time that Richard was in the garage, eventually Ruth goes back in the house. So he's in the garage working. These 2 French-Canadian men arrive to pick up a tank that Danny had welded for them. So they're all kind of, just socializing, having conversation. The men paid Danny $244 by check, then departed the property. Now, on their way out of Whitehall Road, they pass various hunters with rifles on their backs, eager to enjoy the first day of hunting season in New Hampshire.
Oh, and that's a big deal, right?
Shooting, of course, was a year-round sport, but this was the first day of hunting season. Now, a teenager named Court Burton, who worked construction and kind of had been taken under Danny's wing. They had become buddies. He arrived that morning to help do some welding. He was going to paint a few fuel tanks for Danny. Danny was going to be working on a bulldozer. He had to do some welding on a bulldozer and was going to throw this kid a few bucks to kind of come over and help him a little bit. Danny was known to extend a helping hand to neighborhood kids and young people. He would often fix their bicycles or show them how to work on something. Around 11 a.m., Richard Duarte needed to wash his hands, and so he was leaving the garage, or was about to leave the garage, when he hears a loud crack. And this is over Danny's welding generator, which is loud.
Yeah.
Right?
Noisy shop, got things going on.
It reminded him of the M2 carbine shots he had heard in Vietnam. That was his first thought.
So, a gunshot.
Yeah. Soon after, Court Burton came running into the garage, kind of meeting Duarte as he's heading out to go wash his hands. And he says something is wrong with Dan. So over by the bulldozer, Duarte saw Danny's welding helmet on the ground. Danny was lying flat on his back with his arms outstretched. The electric torch was nearby, still humming. Duarte's first thought was that Danny had been electrocuted because he's welding. He's got this generator going. That's a pretty logical thought to have, right?
Well, yeah, he's working with and around electricity. It sounds like he may have had a acetylene torch lit. I mean, it could be a number of things.
Duarte ordered Burton to go inside and call the fire rescue because there was no 911 yet. Duarte began a crude version of CPR, pumping on his friend's chest. Yet he could tell Danny was not breathing and had no pulse. Duarte spotted the neighbor across the street, Kevin Cote, at the mailbox, and he called for help. So Cote came over and turned off the generator and started administering mouth-to-mouth resuscitations. As Duarte pressed on his friend's chest bone, he felt something wet through the leather overalls. And then he could see blood.
Oh, wow.
Duarte ran into the garage looking for something to pack the wound, and he found some plaster of Paris. So when he came back, he kind of smeared that on Danny's chest, thinking it's helping.
Well, they're trying everything they can to help him in some way.
Burton reappeared as sirens were heard in the distance. They came roaring down Whitehall Road. The first law enforcement officer to arrive on the scene was a rookie named Agrafiotois. It's a French name.
Oh, yeah. Oh, really? I thought he was Hispanic.
Shush. There were only 6 officers on the Hooksett Police Department, and they all arrived at the property. So, the entire police force shows up. Because there's only 6 of them.
Well, yeah, and this is what happens in farming communities, things like that. When something happens, be it accident or whatever, everyone tries to render aid of some sort.
The officers compared notes about witnesses hearing a single crack that sounded like a gunshot. Now, in New Hampshire, the state police were tasked with investigating homicides, not the local police.
Yeah, it's a completely different dynamic.
Yeah, it's very different from what we're accustomed to. Also, the Fish and Game Service showed up as well to investigate. Danny's brother Victor had gotten a call around noon from a friend who told him there seemed to be some kind of trouble over at Danny's house. He said, quote, "Danny's been hurt bad. He's bleeding a lot." Bobby Doob, the friend, told him that Danny was being transported to the Elliott Hospital. And by the way, I should mention that while this is happening, Victor's taking this phone call. He's actually having sex with a married woman.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he answered the phone thinking it could have been one of his kids coming over, and he didn't want them to walk in, Kama Sutra positions or whatever.
Right. But put the swing away.
Yeah. So he was not expecting this phone call. The New Hampshire State Police would catch the case, though at the time it had not been declared a homicide yet. A detective arrived, kind of surveyed the property, and was alerted by the hospital pretty quickly after that Danny Paquette had passed.
He didn't make
He
it.
expired.
Well, it sounds like he...
Probably was not alive when he arrived at the hospital.
Yes.
Well, the officers scoured the area for a bullet, which had not been found lodged in Danny's chest.
So he has a gunshot wound, but it passed clean through his body.
Yes.
Okay,
We'll talk
so
more about that in a
sounds
second.
like a high velocity round to me.
Bobby Doob, a friend and neighbor, the one who had contacted Victor, Danny's brother, he immediately told law enforcement that Danny had issues with his girlfriend's sons. Ruth had 3 boys. But Hooksett police, they were no stranger to these problems. In August, just a few months before this event, police responded to a call at Danny's house. When they arrived, he was outside the home with a bloody nose. Danny said Ruth was intoxicated inside and he wanted her out of the house.
Oh, so here we have a full-blown domestic situation.
Oh, we do. And when I tell you more details, you're going to be like, what? Okay, so Ruth had moved in with Danny in June of 1985, but maintained her own residence in Candia. The boys divided their time between the 2 homes. They didn't want to fully move in with Ruth and Danny.
You ain't my daddy, Danny.
Yeah.
Was there a little bit of that going on?
Yes. Now, she didn't even consult with Danny about opening his home up. She just sort of came over with her stuff and moved in. And then was like, oh, yeah, my boys are going to come live here, too.
Well, hold on a second. That's why you don't let them leave anything. Bachelors out there, listen to me on this. No toothbrushes, no feminine products or whatever. Don't leave personal items, if you will, because this is what happens. And then you look up, it's been 6 years.
Yeah. That's what happened. You showed up to my house with a fucking little bag of shit, and then you never left.
She said, "Don't let some fool show up at your house with trash bags."
So basically, you're talking about yourself.
Well, yeah.
You hobosexual.
Well, see, the fact
just
that
needing a place to stay, and then here you are all this time later.
The sexism in your voice right now, because you were assuming I was talking about ladies. I was talking about myself showing up on your doorstep.
Well, you said you were talking to the guys. Like
I said bachelors.
You said don't let her bring.
Well, I could have said bachelorettes. Gosh.
Just shut up.
Hey, ain't you glad I came by your house? Ain't you glad?
I don't know.
Ain't you glad you swiped right?
That is debatable.
All right.
There was a mutual dislike between Danny and the boys. Vincent, the eldest son, he was kind of laid back into music, but Danny felt he was lazy and had no direction. He just wants to hang out and listen to righteous tunes.
Well, you got somebody like Danny, even his pastime or his recreation is still work.
Yeah.
Like fixing stuff. And, when you're a professional welder, you do all kinds. It's hard work. He's working on heavy equipment. It's good money and all that. But yeah, I could see someone like Danny being like, oh my God,
Yes.
People just want to hang out. You're always sitting on your ass. You're always in the house. You know what I mean?
Mark, the middle son, shared the same interests as Danny. Like he was into automobiles. He was a bit of a gearhead as well. But Danny thought Mark was messy. He never put tools back where they belonged. He didn't clean up after himself and was just careless. Danny was someone who had a place for everything.
Right.
And it better go back where it's supposed to go, especially tools.
Well, yeah.
Right?
And that doesn't surprise me because that's his livelihood as well.
Ruth had wrecked a 1977 Nova, and the vehicle was parked at Danny's where Mark had been working on it. The youngest boy was Hal, and he was Danny's favorite because he was eager to do work and helped with odd jobs around the property. It almost sounds like Hal was just a kid and kind of too young to buck him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
On this particular Sunday evening in August, when the police were called out, here's what happened, Dylan. Talk about a domestic situation. Mark, the middle son, he pulled up to the Whitehall Road residence to pick up his younger brother. And he had hoped to avoid seeing Danny altogether, so he just stayed in the car, hoping his little brother was just going to come out and get in the car, right? So while he's waiting in the car, Ruth and Danny, they've been drinking, by the way.
Which always helps all domestic situations.
They come outside, And when they step outside, Danny shouts, "Hey, asshole, before you leave, put the goddamn lug nuts on your mother's car."
Oh, which is an interesting greeting.
Mark retorted, "Kiss my ass," which is a more descriptive way of saying "kiss my grits," right?
Yeah, or eat my shorts.
Ruth then asked her son Mark if he would go on a liquor run, which he had no interest in doing this, but agreed to avoid any drama with his mom. That's when, out of nowhere, Danny approaches the car and punches Mark 4 times through the open driver's window.
This is not healthy behavior at all.
No, Mark gets out of the car and starts returning hits. He aimed for Danny's nose, which he broke. Danny grabs Mark's keys and threw them into some tall grass, like a weedy area. So as Hal, Mark, and Ruth are searching for the keys, Danny positions a ladder on the side of the house and climbs up to the roof to get a better view.
So I got to say, it sounds like more liquor is the last thing that they needed in this situation, for sure.
Right, and I don't know if he kind of went up there thinking maybe he could spot the keys.
Oh.
Or if he's just up there like
lording over everybody.
Like watching and chuckling to himself.
You'll never find those keys.
Yeah, I win. I win against a kid. Ooh, I'm cool. I don't know.
Danny, what are you doing, buddy?
So that's when Mark grabs the ladder, stranding Danny on the roof.
You ain't so smart now, are you, bitch?
But in the process, Mark breaks a window because the ladder is too heavy and he can't really steady it. So he busts out a window.
And see, this proves Danny's point that Mark is a ne'er-do-well who has no strength because he doesn't work, right? And like, he's like, you ain't no kind of man. You can't even pull a ladder down safely.
Oh, he's a teenager too. But
well, yeah, but I mean,
Once Mark found the keys and got in the car, by this time Danny has kind of maneuvered down from the top of the house.
He's come down the drain pipe.
Yes, and as Mark is driving away, Danny picks up a large steel bolt and throws it at the back window of the car, and it shatters. So he breaks the window.
He's like, don't worry, I can fix that.
Danny ended up with a broken nose and 2 black eyes. And this is when he kicks Ruth out of the house. He calls the police and is like, I want her out of my house.
Now, I'm carrying on, but this is a rather...
dysfunctional situation, bud.
This is a very bad situation. There's way too much going on, and there's people inebriated as well, which never helps any situation unless it's a raid.
And you got a grown man fist fighting with a teenage boy.
When you got a grown, yes, exactly. It's not a good look.
Well, after this breakup, the two got back together within 5 weeks.
Because I'm going to imagine this isn't the first time they probably argued and been on the rocks, right?
The boys disapproved of their mother's decision to get back with Danny.
Mama, he beat me up. He made me strand him on the roof. He made me lift that heavy ladder. I damn near got killed, Mama.
So at the morgue, Victor was speechless. Aside from the conflicts with Ruth's sons, he couldn't think of anyone who would want his brother dead. Victor, however, had dealings with a rough crowd of bikers and drug dealers, and he kind of thought maybe someone had mistaken Danny for him. So he's feeling guilty. Like, oh shit, well maybe it's my fault.
So he's in some rough stuff or knows rough people at least.
He does. Absolutely. Okay. Danny was born on January 4th of 1949 in Manchester, New Hampshire. He was the youngest of 6 kids, and the family, they were like modest means. As I mentioned, Arthur Sr. and his wife, Rena, they ran a dairy farm on Brown Avenue. And since Danny and Victor were the youngest boys, they spent a lot of time together working on the farm and doing chores, and they would milk up to 100 cows at a time. And so like when they were born, their other siblings were older and mostly out of the house. So it was kind of like the 2 younger brothers,
right,
were the only 2 in the home.
And everyone helps on the farm, and they're probably out there working a lot together.
It sounds like they were like kind of besties too, In 1964, Danny's mother died unexpectedly, and we're going to talk more about that toward the end of the episode because it's crazy. So just keep that in mind. Danny took her death particularly hard. He began sleepwalking, was just having a lot of trouble. Arthur Sr. married a few months later to a woman named Marguerite. The kids thought she was after Arthur's insurance money. And the marriage impacted the children so much, in fact, that one of the daughters, Joanne, stopped speaking to her dad altogether. She was so pissed that he married this woman.
Well, I mean, you know, people have a right to move on. I told Heather I would never move on. She said she'd want me to be happy if something happened to her. And I told her I could never be happy again if she was gone out of my life. I don't
believe it.
That's true. It's true. Plus, it's a lot of work, like meeting new people and like learning about them. So I'm not into it. But
you do not want a courtship?
No, I would be a widower for life. And I actually heard this thing. It's interesting. Men have widowers have a harder time with the death of their wife than the widow does the death of her husband. And the guy went on to explain that women have deeper connections, like more not complicated, but more intricate relationships with other people outside of just their husband, because just how women are wired, and that men typically have that a higher percentage of men say my wife was my best friend than women say about their husband.
Oh, you're my best friend.
You're my best friend.
And Rufus.
And yes, Rufus is a close second.
He's my other best friend.
But no, so yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like just from my research that, Arthur, he'd been married for so long and was not accustomed to living alone, and it just didn't suit him being single. Like, he needed a woman there to do his laundry and cook dinner for him.
Well, I mean, y'all been in this relationship and it's worked for you for a long, long time. And and deep down, I'm sure he probably just misses her, and misses her doing his laundry.
Well, Danny had a chilly relationship with his stepmother, while Victor described his interactions with Marguerite as downright toxic.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I lost my train. What I was going to say, that's pretty quick. Just a couple few months. It's quick, but who are we to decide for someone else what they're thinking or in all that? But I think a lot of times when it happens quickly, a matter of months, I think people always have in the back of their head, was there a relationship before mom passed? Were you already seeing this other person? You know what I mean? I think that's just almost a natural thing to wonder.
When we discuss Rena's death further, I think it's going to leave you maybe even more baffled. Okay. So in high school, Danny had gotten a job at the Elm Street Hotel in Manchester, New Hampshire. And it was there that he met a girl named Denise Messier and fell in love. Soon there was a pregnancy scandal, which did not fly in the 1960s. Single teen mothers were sent away, and when they returned, there was usually no baby in tow. This was the case with Denise. She was ordered by her parents to stay away from Danny Paquette. So, done got you knocked up. When you come back to town, don't you dare even look in his direction.
So it's like you go live with relatives or something, and then basically have the baby.
Well, they would like send you to
and then the baby's adopted,
or to those unwed homes for unwed mothers.
Right.
That were usually like run by, like a church organization. In 1968, Danny was sent draft papers and shipped off to Army basic training. He was an infantryman assigned to rockets, but instead of Vietnam, they gave him orders to West Germany. Danny had been dating a hippie chick named Stephanie at the time. She had gotten pregnant before he left for the Army. And Danny wanted things to be different this time around. He wanted to do the right thing. Since he had no say when Denise had gotten pregnant the first time, Danny proposed to Stephanie, and the couple were married in 1969. Stephanie stayed behind in New Hampshire while Danny shipped out overseas. Now, after their daughter Jennifer was born, Stephanie decided to move to West Germany to be with her husband. For the first time, the couple had an opportunity to live together and get to know each other, because up until this point, they had just been casually kind of dating, right?
Yeah.
It turns out they had nothing in common.
I was afraid of this.
Stephanie was a peacenik who didn't believe in the war. Danny was in the army and obviously supportive of the mission. She felt Danny was easily angered and controlling. Without a real connection and no friends in West Germany, Stephanie decided to move back to New Hampshire. Danny was discharged from the army in 1971, returning home to his wife and child. However, the relationship had soured. The couple was often fighting and arguing. During one heated discussion, Danny became enraged after Stephanie threatened to leave and take their daughter. Basically, she said, "You'll never see her again." Danny flew into this rage, and he picks up a fully clothed Stephanie and throws her into a bathtub filled with water. And he says, "You fucking bitch, I'll fucking kill you."
Damn, Danny.
Stephanie was granted a divorce that same year. Upon his return home, Danny and Victor had spent a lot of time with a friend named Ray Foote, who was a welder. Foote taught the brothers everything he knew about welding, and so that's really how they got their start in the welding business. In 1973, he's divorced, kind of doing his own thing, kind of started his own little side business welding. Danny began seeing Denise again. She was newly divorced and visiting from Alaska. After her her first divorce, she moved to Alaska, just kind of on a whim. So she was back in New Hampshire visiting family and bumps into Danny. She had a young daughter with her, Melanie, from her first marriage. And the couple, they have a whirlwind courtship. They're like, kind of high school sweethearts, first love.
Yeah.
So everything's rosy and peachy. The childhood sweethearts married on December 10th of 1974. Danny adopted Melanie, and then the pair had two more daughters, Audrey and Caroline. When Danny told his brother Victor that he was marrying Denise, Victor said he wanted to shout, "What are you, fucking nuts?" But he didn't want to hurt his brother's feelings. It's kind of funny. Siblings, especially when they're very close, might see this relationship's not good. It's not going to work out.
Right.
But you love your brother, your sister, and you don't want to hurt their feelings. So you're not going to tell them, like, "You're stupid. That's a bad choice."
Well, I think we've
I
all
like
had
her.
I think we've all had that for either friend or family member who you can just see the train coming down the tracks, but they're head over heels or whatever, in love, if you will, and they can, if you tried to tell them, they wouldn't listen. So you kind of just go with it.
So Danny and Denise buy the house on Whitehall Road. In 1978, Danny and Denise officially launched Paquette Welding Incorporated. She did most of the administrative work, that keeps the books straight.
Billing
and
and all that stuff.
For Danny.
Maybe acquiring materials.
Yeah, that kind of stuff while he does, the welding. By 1980, the marriage had crumbled. Denise moved into an apartment in Manchester with the girls. Danny seemed to fall apart with the dissolution of his family. He would often show up crying, and if he wasn't upset and crying, then he was threatening to attack Denise if she didn't get back together with him.
See, Danny sounds like a rather emotional person, and I don't think he has real good control over his emotions, right? And maybe some anger issues mixed in there.
She sought a protective order against Danny. A few months later, in December of 1980, a friend phoned Denise to say that Danny had purchased a .45. That's a big gun.
Yeah, that's a big gun.
Isn't that the Dirty Harry gun?
Well, I mean, if it's the, long barrel revolver style, I think, that's a hand cannon is what that is.
Danny was threatening to kill Denise and then himself. When Denise finds this out, she hangs up the phone, immediately calls police, and then flees to her mother's house. The morning after, so the very next day, Denise is driving to work when she sees Danny, and he's following her. So he's figured out she was at her mom's house. Danny is yelling at her, quote, "You motherfucking bitch, I swear to God, I will kill you."
And that's his love language, threats of death.
"I hate you. I will kill you. You better come home to me, you whore."
I love
you, bitch.
I love you, bitch.
Bitch, I love you. Yeah.
No, but this is bad, dude. It sounds like he's got sprinkling in a little light stalking as well.
Yes. When Denise was able to pull over the car, she called police, and since Danny had violated the protective order, he was ordered to jail. Now, upon hearing the news, Danny lunges across the table at the judge in a threatening manner.
Which is going to help his case.
At that point, the judge orders Danny to be taken to the state mental hospital for commitment. Danny spends 1 year at the hospital in Concord, New Hampshire. The conditions were deplorable in 1980. It was like something out of a Ken Kesey novel. So this is at a time when these mental hospitals, these asylums, were just fucking awful.
Wow. So the judge was like, I'm not playing this shit, and he had him committed?
Yeah.
And nowadays it seems like that doesn't really stick. You know what I mean? You'll hear someone having an issue like this and well, I've actually seen this, and then 24 hours later, there they are again, back in the bushes, causing trouble.
Are you talking about your...
I've seen it before, okay? But wow, so he spends a year in this place,
he does.
And this is at the height of probably. I mean, I know there was a lot more terrible things done to people back in the day before this even, but things are not good in mental hospitals.
No.
They're
not good.
Underfunded, and we've talked many times about how it seems to attract some of the staff of being sadistic, mean, horrible people who just treat these people like shit, take advantage of them in every way. This sounds like a terrible place to be stuck for a year. And I'm sorry, I don't know if Danny deserved this, but he shouldn't have been wilding out. This is what happens.
Denise was granted a divorce in August of 1981. Danny was released from the hospital seemingly well and was ordered to pay $75 a week toward child support. He was also granted visitation with the girls, but it was decided that Denise should have no contact with him when they exchanged the children.
I think that sounds fair.
Right. Everything seemed to be working out fine for Danny at this point. The weekend visits with the girls, they're a regular thing. He's making his child support payments on time, He and Denise aren't having any problems. They seem like they've moved past their problems, moving forward. But one evening, Danny goes to pick up the girls, only to discover Denise's apartment has been cleared out. She skipped town, taking Danny's 2 biological daughters, Caroline and Audrey, with her. Melanie, the stepdaughter, was also gone, and Danny would never see his daughters again.
So, given the issues she's had with Danny, what do you feel about this, as far as it being wrong or right on her behalf? Because I get it. He's been rather violent, the threats, the stalking, and all this stuff. And even if it's okay now, maybe it's in the back of her mind, like you never know what he might do next. You know what I mean? But I think this is a pretty severe move on her part.
Yes, and I think there will be some more information later about Denise that comes out. The way maybe she handled the situation with her first husband and her daughter Melanie. That you find out maybe Denise isn't the best person either. And she might be a little manipulative and know how to kind of work people to her advantage. I think we're going to see a little bit of that. So just hold off.
Okay.
So let's get back to the crime scene. Police are filming the area. One of the men, probably Duarte, had traced the body where it lay in the grass. Kind of did a little outline for police to show them this is where Danny was at, and we found him. As officers are combing the area, one noticed the distance from Danny, positioned at the bulldozer, to the wooded tree line, and it's about a 300-yard distance. They kind of did a reenactment, which proved an awfully small target for the shooter to hit from a great distance.
Well, that's nearly 1,000 feet. That's a pretty damn good shot from that distance. I don't care who you are.
Yeah, and even in a scope,
right?
The officers sort of stood at the tree line to the bulldozer, and it was a very small area that would be like Danny's
center mass.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Detective Sergeant Roland Lammy with the New Hampshire State Police arrived, and he would ultimately take over as the lead detective. He's been described as an Andy Sipowicz type, gruff, profane, brash, but he was a fierce leader who had the loyalty of subordinates. And they considered him to be the best detective on the state police force.
See, if I was friends or family and something had happened to someone, and this is the guy who shows up to take the lead, I would be all for it. I would want an Andy Sipowicz type of person to be leading the investigation.
Well, immediately, Victor Paquette and Detective Lammy kind of sized one another up. Lammy assumes that Victor's just this biker who's probably into drugs and isn't going to cooperate, while Victor assumes that Lammy is thinking Danny's a lowlife and isn't going to do his job because he's not going to care about solving his brother's murder.
So they both have these assumptions about each other.
Yes. Lammy asked Victor, what do you think happened here? Victor said, quote, I think that somebody might have mistook my brother for me and killed the wrong guy. Victor admitted that he was having an affair with a married woman and had been with her at the time Danny was killed. Since both brothers were welders, someone with a grudge against Victor might have looked in the phone book at Paquette Welding, and ultimately this could have been some sort of deadly mix-up, like a case of mistaken identity.
Okay, so that's a pretty specific last name, and the guy's a welder. I mean, that kind of, at first I was like...
Both ride motorcycles.
I was like, how are they going to really mix them up, but that kind of makes sense in a weird way.
The shooter had exceptional skill. It was a dead bullseye shot that pierced the victim's heart from 300 yards. The shot killed Danny before he even hit the ground. The triggerman was either like an excellent marksman or lucky.
Right.
Like lucky as hell. Yet the most crucial piece of evidence was missing, the slug from the weapon. It was believed to be a bullet from a rifle. Police agreed it was possible to make the shot from a handgun, but without the bullet, it was hard to ID a murder weapon. A bullet was the only physical evidence that could lead to a killer.
Well, possible to hit some, but I mean, I would say your odds go way, way down on hitting someone with a pistol round from 300 yards. I mean, that's a hell of a damn long ways for a pistol.
Agreed. But they're saying, well, I mean, it's not impossible.
Well, it's not. I mean, you could hit anything. I mean, yeah.
But without the bullet, they don't know.
Right.
Right? Autopsy suggested the bullet had entered into the chest, then out the left shoulder. Danny was standing at the time, so the bullet traveled at an incline out of the body at a steep 30-degree angle. So think of a trajectory like a football punt.
So it's entering low and coming out high?
Yes.
Okay.
If the bullet launched high, it could have come down anywhere, including the woods, a wetlands area. And you have to keep in mind this entire, there's woods, there's a wetland nearby, this field, and the whole area is covered by leaves because this is New Hampshire, early November.
So basically one of the worst places to be trying to find a bullet.
A needle in a haystack. Oh, yeah.
You need some metal detectors out there, bud.
Well, it just so happened that a man was in a hot air balloon floating above the scene and happened to be videotaping while he was just hanging out in his hot air. While he was ballooning.
Like, you want to go see my balloon?
Unfortunately, this tape proved useless. And this is a fluke, Dylan.
Wait, now, is this when the crime actually happened? He just happened to be floating up there in his balloon, hanging out.
Yes.
Wow, I thought you meant afterwards. Okay, wow.
No, like at the time this is happening. There's a lot of weird stuff associated.
So he's filming with an old school VHS.
Yes.
And
like,
he's
hey, I'm in a balloon.
Hey, you know what? That's pretty badass to have a hot air balloon.
Do you want to go up in a hot air balloon?
I think I would. It kind of sounds cool, but I've also seen where they drag across like hot, those super big power lines and stuff, and there's like these terrible accidents in the balloon. So I don't know.
I don't like heights.
But I gotta say, I don't think I would be that comfortable in a basket, that high up. But I also have to say, when I do see a hot air balloon in the air, to this day,
it looks pretty cool.
It makes me feel like a kid inside. I mean, it truly does.
I get really excited.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, look.
Well, yeah, I used to, there was actually a place that like did rides not too awful far from the paper mill where I used to work there.
Oh, yeah. I had a girlfriend that went on a hot air balloon ride there with a boy, one of her boyfriends had taken her on a date.
Yeah,
in the hot air balloon.
I come out one day and there's like 5 or 6, and some are close, some are far away, and I'm just like, what? And finally they come over the radio like, Dylan, where the hell are you at? Because I was just outside looking at the damn balloons.
I also worked with this girl at the newspaper, and her father lived in Sedona, Arizona, and owned a hot air balloon company.
Wow.
Where he would do the tours for people. And I thought that was kind of a cool... I was like, how did he get into that? Like, how do you decide you just wake up one day like, hey, I think I'm going to float in some hot air balloons?
Now, if I did have a float, I think over the desert would be an awesome place to do it. So that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, when he passed away, she and her sister had him cremated. That was his wish. And they put him in a balloon and floated him. Like, they went to the desert and, like, set the balloon.
And just floated him off into oblivion.
That's what he wanted.
Okay.
So I thought that was really cool.
That is awesome.
Right? All right, so that tape proved useless. It didn't capture anything to help police. Here's the weird thing, Dylan. Another just strange element to this case. At the same time that law enforcement is out trying to recover the bullet, investigating the scene, they get another phone call regarding a pair of bodies found in the woods not far from Danny's home. Allenstown shared a border with Hooksett, which cuts through Bear Brook State Park, a 10,000-acre preserve. And so while detectives were at Danny's house on Whitehall Road, a hunter made a gruesome discovery. 2 bodies were located under a piece of canvas in the Bear Brook State Park. The victims were a woman in her mid-20s and a female child around 8 or 9 years old. They were nude and in late stages of decomposition. There were some pieces of evidence that suggested they had been dismembered.
Oh, my gosh.
It was believed the victims were related due to similar dental characteristics. And this was a coincidence that investigators couldn't ignore. Unfortunately, it would be a distraction leading detectives further away from the truth about Danny's death.
But, hey, you have to. I mean, there's no way you can't be like, okay, is this connected? You know, what the hell's going on? Now we have 2 more bodies. So, yeah, I mean, I understand it might not have worked out, but you have to take a look at it. There's no way you can't.
Since it was the first day of hunting season, the Fish and Game Department theorized that Danny was killed by stray bullets, and it was a possibility. Stray bullets can travel 1 mile to 2 miles with fatal velocity. Disproving the accident, or that it was an accidental shot from a hunter, was a lot harder than law enforcement imagined.
Well, and that was my first thought. You know, it's first day of hunting season. People are just, clamoring to get out in the woods. And, you take a shot at something, and who knows where that bullet goes.
Officers asked Duarte to listen to various guns being fired while the welder was running to see if maybe he could recognize the shot. Court Burton said a .38 sounded close.
A .38 rifle? A .38. Oh, a .38. That's all we know.
That's all I know.
Okay.
During the investigation, law enforcement copied license plate numbers of cars and pickup trucks that was surrounding the area. You know, people were kind of parked all up and down the road, out in the woods, hunting, first day of hunting season. So these drivers were contacted to see if they had seen or heard anything unusual at the time. Had they been in the woods hunting?
See someone else acting suspiciously?
Right. It didn't take long to rule out the bodies in Bear Brook State Park, that they had nothing to do with Danny's death. The victims had been in the park anywhere from maybe 6 months to 3 years. On Tuesday, November 12th, a break came in the case. A lineman with the New England Phone Company had a trouble report on Whitehall Road right by Danny's house. A visual inspection of the wire showed a small hole in the plastic covering, and when he took a deeper look, there was a bullet lodged in the line.
No
way. It was
way.
a 1 in a million chance of finding this.
Now, I mean, think about that. This bullet's traveled possibly 300 yards, nearly 1,000 feet, struck Danny, exited his body, and then caught the power line. I mean, that is crazy.
The phone line.
The phone line, yeah. Well, even crazier because it's a damn small line. I mean, it's a tiny line.
A .270 caliber bullet was located. A task force with the state police at the helm had 4 members, so they've got 4 detectives from the state police. They have 3 prosecutors from the state's attorney's offices that were just working in an advisory capacity. They have 2 officers from Fish and Game, and then the Hooksett Police Department has a few officers. So they have like a task force trying to solve Danny's murder. Chief Oliver with the Hooksett Police Department was no stranger to homicide investigations. He'd actually been a New York police detective before serving in his position at the Hooksett Department. He wanted a slower pace of life, so he left the NYPD. But when he was involved with the NYPD, he was part of a special service that were like intelligence operatives. They would go undercover. I mean, so this guy knew what he was doing.
Yeah, so he's very seasoned.
He is.
Lots of experience.
But unfortunately, he's not allowed to investigate the homicide.
Yeah, we don't need your help. I know you might know everything, but no thanks.
Detective Lammy with the state police was leaning that Danny's death was an accident. He went through Danny's black book, which was filled mostly with business associates and relatives, but there were also a few married women listed, but they denied knowing Danny when they were contacted.
But you're
Yeah, well.
yeah, but you're in his book.
Yeah.
With a little asterisk by your name.
People around Hooksett offered up mixed reviews of Danny Paquette. Some neighbors described him as, quote, golden to people he liked, always willing to help out a friend, how he would take time to fix kids' bikes, and how he would allow other neighborhood kids to ride horses in his field. One woman informed police that there were rumors about Danny. He allegedly molested his stepdaughter, Melanie, and that was why his ex-wife, Denise, had taken off with the girls. Someone else suggested that Danny was cheating on Ruth with a 15-year-old girl who lived in the neighborhood. She was described as a blonde with glasses.
Okay.
Danny's barber told Detective Lammy that Danny had discussed having a girlfriend in the city who happened to be married to a rich man. So it sounds like Danny's getting around.
Sounds like the tongues are wagging.
And Danny might be a creep.
Well, that kind of threw me. The 15-year-old. I mean, what the hell? If there's any truth to that, that's very not okay. But it also sounds like there's a lot of speculation going on in the community. Because, as far as like, I heard he molested his stepdaughter. That's why she took off with the kids. That could be, just mentioned at a damn, people. Because I would say unsolved murder like this in a community like this one would be a big part of the conversation. You know what I mean? A lot of speculation going on.
Others mentioned that 3 years earlier, Danny had been involved in a fatal motorcycle accident in which his passenger, Diane Boothby, had been killed. The woman's brother had held Danny responsible. So some folks thought this could be a retaliation. Danny's cleaning lady told law enforcement that he had propositioned her before, so she didn't feel comfortable being alone with him, and that she usually brought a friend or a relative along to clean his house.
Danny.
A name kept popping up too. Gemma Bolduc, who was a biker with an unsavory criminal reputation. And this biker had a falling out with Victor, with Danny's brother. Many theorized that Bolduc had murdered Danny, maybe mistaking him for Victor. The Ouimets had been Danny's neighbors for years. They didn't know about any improprieties. The couple said they had never had reservations about letting their children play with Danny's children. When the older daughter was interviewed, Detective Lammy noted that she seemed nervous and evasive about Danny. He also was like, okay, she has blonde hair and wears glasses.
Oh, no.
And is 15, which people had said Danny was sleeping with a 15-year-old who was blonde and had glasses.
Yeah. That's going to stand out to a detective and make him wonder just a little bit.
Well, he wondered if this was the girl who was allegedly involved in a sexual relationship with the dead man. Then, out of the blue, a man shows up at the police station confessing to the murder. He was intoxicated, they could tell, and the details didn't match up. He claimed that Danny was shot at close range, which he wasn't, and that Danny, according to this man, had a drug habit and owed $4,000 for cocaine. He said that 8 drug dealers, including himself, had paid $600 each, so that would be $4,800, to hire a guy named Kevin from Massachusetts to come into town and kill Danny.
So they got this pro out of Massachusetts. They spent more than the original debt, right?
Yes.
To have Danny killed.
Yeah. That's what he said.
What is this guy doing?
Well, eventually he admitted that, yes, he just made the whole thing up.
I don't understand.
I don't know either, bud.
It happens so much. People interject themselves into these investigations for all in the weirdest ways. And I guess it's weird, strange, attention-seeking behavior, maybe. But it's like, dude, what if they believed you? What if you went in there like carrying on like this and gave them a few details that were kind of matched up, and then you end up convicted by a freaking jury? I mean, it's like the dumbest shit.
Well, when law enforcement told Victor the story, Victor was like, my brother had zero tolerance for drugs. He would get angry at Victor for smoking pot. Danny didn't hang out with the drug crowd. Victor admitted he did, but he was like, my brother absolutely did not hang out with those types of people.
Right.
Many of the drug dealers frequented a bar called Zoo, and Danny never went there. But Victor's like, hey, I go hang out there, I admit, but my brother would not step foot in that place. My brother was anti-drugs. He would drink, but he wouldn't even smoke pot. So that is crazy. Like, he does not owe anybody for cocaine.
Well, it's not. It sounds like he's not only he probably looks down on people that do drugs. You know what I mean?
Victor told Detective Lammy that he did have a problem with Gemma Bolduc, but that they had resolved this issue, and he really didn't think that guy was responsible for Danny's death. There was a gallery of suspects, a wheel of motives, and no evidence.
You said this case was crazy, isn't it?
Oh, it gets... Yes, just hang on, Dylan. Danny's funeral was held at the St. Francis Assisi Church, and he was buried at the Pine Grove Cemetery. Danny's biological daughters did not attend the funeral. Denise had taken the girls to Alaska, and no one knows where she is, by the way. Like, Danny's family has no idea. Danny never knew where she went. However, there was a big secret that Denise's family was holding, and that is Melanie had returned to New Hampshire and was living in Hopkinton. Denise's brother Philip and his wife Kathy McGuire, and by the way, Kathy worked at the state's attorney's office, so she definitely had a conflict of interest with this case, because she was Danny's former sister-in-law, and she's heading up, prosecuting homicides.
Oh, so she has she doesn't just, she's not like an administrator or something. She's actually a prosecutor.
Yes.
Wow.
She's a lawyer. And she works for the state's attorney's office. And they are caring for Melanie, for the girl. And they did not want Danny to know this. According to Denise's relatives, after Danny was released from the mental hospital and resuming visits with the kids, 11-year-old Melanie would often call her mother or her grandfather crying, and she would beg them to pick her up. It was shortly after that, Denise packed up the toddlers and Melanie and moved to Alaska. Melanie had accused Danny of sexual misconduct. During the investigation, law enforcement learned that Denise was having financial problems in Alaska. She and 15-year-old Melanie were constantly fighting, and that Uncle Philip suggested Melanie return to New Hampshire and move in with him and his wife.
So there was some credence to that, possibly some inappropriate behavior between Danny and the girls in some way.
Possibly.
Okay.
Now, when 15-year-old Melanie was interviewed, she told law enforcement that she never liked Danny. She said, quote, "He was very strict and mean." She also said he belittled her mother. Melanie blamed their move to Alaska on Danny, saying that he was always pestering Denise. She also said that Danny had molested her. On the day Danny had been killed, Melanie had gone to a hockey game with a classmate named Eric, then later in the day left for Quebec because she was going on a field trip with her French class. Victor Paquette told Detective Lammy that he thought Catherine McGuire had killed Danny due to a custody dispute, that she had had someone kill him. Because she and her husband were caring for Melanie and were going to file paperwork to be her guardians. But when Danny would be served with this paperwork, he would learn where the girl was staying in New Hampshire, that she was back in the state.
Okay.
So they decided not to file the paperwork.
Oh.
Because they were trying to keep her from him. Because allegedly she was so afraid of him.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know that's not true. We don't know it is true. So that's tough.
Well, There'll be some interesting statements made in part 2 that might leave a little bit of doubt. And we always want to believe the victim, but
we do.
There's a few things that just that stick out as a bit odd.
Well, I have to say, and this is terrible especially for the true victims of molestation and things like that. This happens a lot. It really does when you have two people fall out and there's kids involved and they weaponize their children or their adopted children against each other. And this is one of the more common things towards the man to say that he molested you, because it's such a heavy accusation. You know what I mean? And I think people tend to, which I prefer, is land on the side of the victim until we know it's not true.
Right. Because
they need all the support in the world in case it is true. But that happens, and it's a really terrible thing. And I'm not saying that's what happens here. But it's a really... when people do that and manipulate children like this against each other, I think it's really a sick thing to do.
We'll dive more into Melanie's story in part 2. So I want you to just have an open mind.
Okay.
Don't draw too many conclusions just yet. Okay?
Oh my gosh.
I'm telling you, this story is full of twists and turns.
I want to know. It's like an M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Since Danny had no will, Philip Messier, this is Denise's brother. He applies to be the administrator over Danny's estate, and the probate court granted the request.
How does that work?
A law firm was hired to sell off Danny's belongings for the children, and each girl received about $20,000 apiece. Victor Paquette saw it as a motive for murder. If Denise was having financial problems in Alaska, the girls would get an inheritance from a dead Danny. Also, if he was gone, that meant Denise could return to New Hampshire.
Well, I mean, I can't blame him for maybe having these thoughts. Here, they're estranged from Danny, his kid, the girls as well. But now they're kind of swooping back in after he's been, killed, possibly murdered. I think it would be easy to feel like that as his brother. That they're kind of swooping back in to take what little bit he had,
Catherine McGuire, now that's Philip's wife, she tells Detective Lammy that Melanie had spoken with a counselor who reported the sexual abuse to the state. And although a report had been filed, no one from the state had spoken to Danny before he was murdered. Detective Lammy tracked down Melanie's biological father, Tom Benzel. Benzel had little interest in Denise or Melanie, admitting that part of his life he had left in the past. When Denise had returned from Alaska the first time, Benzel had tried to get visitation with his daughter. And when this happened, Denise showed up shortly after with her own paperwork for adoption. She told Benzel that Danny wanted to adopt Melanie.
After all that's happened?
Well, she leaves her first husband, divorces him, moves to Alaska. So her daughter Melanie has no contact with her biological father. She comes to visit, meets Danny, they reunite, decide to get married. And right off the bat, Denise is telling her ex-husband, Danny wants to adopt our daughter.
Which is a bit...
because the ex-husband wanted to have visitation rights to his child. So she's immediately like, Danny's going to adopt her.
What in the world?
Well, it just goes to show me, I feel like Denise is someone who knows how to manipulate people, and she doesn't want to have to deal with her ex-husband, so she's going to get Danny to adopt this girl. So she doesn't have to, give up custody of her child or share her child.
Yeah,
I think this is pretty manipulative.
It takes her ex out of the picture, and it seems awful quick. I mean, I really respect people that adopt children in situations like this, but it usually doesn't happen that fast. You know what I mean?
Well, it usually doesn't. And then she has this pattern of leaving a man and then moving, not telling him where she is.
Long distances.
Yeah, because she did this the first time when she moved to Alaska. And now she's done it to Danny and is alienating Danny from his children, just like she alienated her first husband from their daughter.
It certainly seems to be a pattern.
So I think there's a pattern here, and I think I don't know Danny, and maybe he was a good guy, maybe he's not a good guy, but I also think maybe Denise isn't the best person. She seems like someone who's manipulative and very self-serving and makes these rash decisions that benefit her without really thinking of the long-term effects, right? And doesn't seem like maybe she has her kids' best interest in mind.
No,
it's more about what Denise wants.
Yeah, and the kids are along for the ride, and this seems like a lot.
It does.
Moving that far away and then moving back and then this and yeah, seems like a lot.
Well, Tom agreed to allow the adoption to go through. After all, he had not been allowed to have any contact with his daughter for years, so he didn't really know her. It wasn't like they had a relationship. He hadn't seen her really since she was a baby. So he just kind of agrees to this. And he didn't hear from Denise again until she divorced Danny. And at that point, Denise contacts Tom saying that Melanie wanted to know more about her biological father.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, and I'm sure she probably sold it to him like, well, you won't be responsible for anything. You won't have to worry about,
That's exactly how she sold it.
The finances.
I'm not looking for money or anything like that. I just want her to know you. Okay. So Tom agrees to meet with Melanie. And, the first few meetings and visits are quite awkward. Like they're total strangers, trying to forge this father-daughter relationship. Tom has already kind of moved on and is in another marriage. And of course, his new wife is like, I don't know if I like you spending a lot of time over at your ex's apartment.
Well, yeah.
I mean, you're taking a lot of time to, to be with this child that you haven't seen in years and years.
And I'm sure he's probably told her before how this bothers me, makes me feel, that's
right.
That. Yeah.
So it was causing him it was causing conflict in his personal life. And he did try to maintain contact with Melanie. They would write letters and make phone calls. But eventually she just stopped reaching out. Like by the time she moves to Alaska, she's completely just cut off contact with him. Then out of nowhere, so, Melanie stops talking to her dad. Then out of nowhere, Loretta Messier, Denise's mother, calls Tom Benzel to ask for money to buy Melanie a plane ticket from Alaska to New Hampshire because she wants to move to New Hampshire and Denise can't afford it, and gives him this story about how everyone in the family's pitching in to buy Melanie a plane ticket and wants to know if he'll be willing to throw in some money.
I mean, I don't think they should call him and ask him that personally.
No, because again, I just think these people are kind of conniving and calculating and manipulative.
Well, it almost seems, and I can't speak for Melanie, and I know that would be such a, she didn't make these choices as a kid, and she's kind of in the middle of her mom's stuff, but it's almost like she didn't really want to get to know her dad. Maybe, or maybe it just didn't work out and she just didn't feel like she was getting a lot of positive out of it. It's almost, again, like you're being wound up by Denise to even bother Tom again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, oh, wow, look at that. You're going to call and ask him for, it might be his biological daughter, but why am I responsible? You done been adopted by another man, which, I signed my rights away. And your mom's kept you from me all your life. I'm sorry.
And your mom takes you to Alaska.
I don't even know
and then
you.
Says, I don't have the money to send you back to New Hampshire. I mean, he's probably like, that's not my problem. I didn't take you to Alaska.
Well, yeah. And some people may view that as cold because, some people have this view of, it's your daughter. I view those types of things a little differently.
Yeah, I do too.
If you don't have that strong interpersonal connection, it's really not your and I don't know anything about these people, obviously. I don't know what Tom is or does or how he is. But I don't think it's right at all to call and ask him to do anything for Melanie. I don't.
No. Well, he declined to throw in money on the ticket.
He's like,
thanks
no.
for giving me the opportunity, but I'm not going to be giving you a couple $100.
Right.
Go ask Danny.
I'm going to run this by my wife, and she says, and the computer says no.
So when Detective Lammy meets with Loretta, now that's Denise's mother, she explains that her daughter Denise was having money problems. She couldn't afford to buy Melanie name brand clothing.
Oh.
And that was causing conflict between the mother and daughter. So again, that doesn't really sound like a major issue. I mean, I guess I see that as something that's very superficial and not reason to like fight with your mom and want to move away from your mom.
Well, no.
Just because you can't afford to buy me something I want.
No, and if Denise isn't, I mean, I don't know what to say. The way I've always viewed it is if I'm having money problems, I either, get a better job that pays more, or I just work more, or I have a side hustle, or I do so, I get through it. I've never.
Well, to me, money problems is like I can't afford to pay rent and
Well,
we're
that's
starving.
right.
Money problems isn't like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't buy you a $200 pair of jeans.
That's not money problems. I mean, at all in my book.
So again, that statement, and I don't know these people, right? But that statement makes me think that like Melanie's kind of a brat, and that Denise has sort of spoiled her into thinking that she is entitled to these things. I mean, I don't know. It seems not like totally normal.
Maybe because that's Denise's attitude, that I deserve this, that, she's getting it from her mama, if you will, like Juvenile warned us about. And, but yeah, no, if I was hearing someone tell this, just recounting this is what's happening in my family, I'd be like, okay.
Yeah. Well, Uncle Philip, now that's Denise's brother, right? And his wife, Catherine, the state prosecutor, they got a lot of money. Like, they're pretty well off. And they offered for Melanie to come live with them because they could afford to buy her new clothes.
And her plane ticket.
And pay for her college.
Wow.
And anything she wanted to do.
Well, good for Melanie.
So they're going to fund Melanie's
her diesel
her
jeans.
lifestyle. Well, this is the 80s, so I don't know. They're going to buy her some Guess jeans or whatever. Some Fiorucci's. Now, on December 31st, police interviewed Eric Windhurst. That's Melanie's classmate. That's the one that she had spent the day with, like the day of Danny's murder.
Oh, yeah, they went to a hockey game.
They went to a hockey game together. And after the conversation, John Windhurst Sr., Eric's father, called law enforcement back to say that Melanie had told Eric that Danny had beat her mother and molested her and a neighbor girl.
All right.
So he just wanted law enforcement to be aware that that's, what Melanie had been telling everyone. Another interesting development arose. Denise's sister, Pauline, had moved to Alaska with Denise and the girls, and then she suddenly returned to New Hampshire. Pauline had stolen Denise's boyfriend, an indigenous fellow named Willie Crow, and he had moved to New Hampshire to be with her.
I thought Willie would have a little bit better morals about him.
Now listen to this. Dog.
Willie Crow.
This is when the story, I'm telling you, it's
what the frick, dude? It's like a soap opera.
It is. Now it turns out that Pauline Messier had embezzled $24,000 from her new job in New Hampshire. So she comes back from Alaska. She's stolen her sister's man. And she's also stolen $24,000.
She just takes what she wants.
She does. So Pauline called a family meeting. Now this is like Loretta, the mother, Uncle Philip and his wife, the other brothers and sisters. She calls this big family meeting and confesses what she's done. Like, hey guys, I embezzled $24,000 from my boss. Now Pauline needs to repay $15,000 cash to her boss so that he doesn't turn her into police. Like, she's made a deal with him. If I pay you $15,000, will you not press charges? And he agreed to this.
Why do I feel like this is the main reason for the family meeting? So we need to have a fundraiser.
Yes, they're going to have a bake sale. Now, the theft is a Class A felony with a 7 to 15 year sentence. And I can tell you, none of the family agreed to pay off her debt. Her brother did say he would help her find a lawyer.
So maybe they should call Tom and see if he wants to throw in this pot.
Yes.
Hey, Tom, I know you probably didn't like Pauline that much, but do you mind helping with her defense fund?
Soon police learned about Pauline's legal troubles, and they began to wonder, did Pauline send money to Denise in Alaska, and did they use the money to pay for a hitman?
Oh.
Law enforcement began investigating this angle, trying to find a link between the murder and the embezzlement case. Willie Crow was able to offer up an itemized list of expenditures, furniture, clothing, electronics.
Turns out Willie's a stickler for receipts.
But it only accounted for about half the money. There was still around $10,000 missing that they couldn't come up with where this money had gone, right? And that was enough money, police thought, for Denise to hire someone to kill Danny.
Well, yeah, but we've heard it floated for a lot less than $10,000.
Finally, the Hillsborough County DA's office pressed charges for embezzlement, and they set up a trial for May. And a tip came in that Pauline and Willie had problems with cocaine and that a great bit of the money had gone to fund that addiction. So that's why that $10,000 was unaccounted for.
So we bought a couch.
They had done snorted it.
And we bought a table with a glass top.
Well, yeah, they said when they went to Pauline's house, she did have a house full of new furniture.
And then we bought a bunch of cocaine. Okay. We had just a big couple 3 weeks there.
It was like Scarface. It just piles of it on the table. Yeah. Yes.
Willie Crow and Pauline. Willie and Pauline just doing the nose candy.
I'm really sad that no one names their daughter Pauline anymore.
That's a great name.
Such a great name.
Yeah.
I like Pauline.
If you're not embezzling from people and stealing stuff.
By now, Ruth's sons had been ruled out as suspects, so Pauline remained the unofficial prime suspect. Finally, after months with no movement in the case, the state police decided it was an accident. The case would remain open, but the investigators were being tasked elsewhere. Danny Paquette's death investigation was stalled, so it just goes cold. And this leaves Victor very angry because the state was covering up another murder.
What?
Okay, are you ready for this? I'm telling you, so many crazy twists and turns in this story. Okay.
What a twist.
So 14-year-old Pamela Jean Mason, just stay with me, Dylan. It's all going to make sense here in a minute. 14-year-old Pamela Jean Mason was a high school freshman, and she had posted a sign at the Laundrorama offering babysitting services. On January 13th of 1964, Pamela received a phone call from a man asking about a babysitting job or offering her a babysitting job. She took off walking in a snowstorm, and she never returned home. A week later, gloves, a coat, and some books were found scattered on the west side of Manchester. On the 8th day, Pamela's body was found in a snowbank by I-93 in South Manchester. Pamela Mason had been beaten, bound, stabbed, shot, and repeatedly raped.
That's horrible.
Yes. The town was in a panic. The murder was eerily similar to the February 1960 murder of an 18-year-old Sandra Valady. She had gone missing during a snowstorm, and later her body had been found dumped in a snowbank. She had been molested, stabbed, and shot. Her belongings were also found just strewn around town. Rena Paquette, this is Danny's mother, had worked at the Laundrorama where Pamela Mason had hung up that babysitting flyer. One night, Rena confided in her husband, Arthur, that she knew who killed Pamela Mason. When Arthur asked what she was talking about, Rena informed him that the killer's mother had told her.
At the Laundrorama.
Look.
Damn, why's the Laundrorama the center of so much?
It's hard to Laundrorama.
Laundrorama.
Yeah.
Man, it sounds like you have fun while you wash your
does.
clothes.
It kind of sounds like a little whimsical.
Yeah, and there's like lights and stuff.
Or there could be like go-go dancers and cages at the Laundrorama. There might be some psychedelic dance music.
Like, go ahead and dry your clothes
like
at the
Laugh-In
Laundrorama.
type of theme music.
Yeah.
No. Da-na-na-na-na,
Oh, is it?
Thinking like go-go, 60s go-go type.
Okay, man, let me do techno Laundrorama. I mean, it works
It's the
with
60s.
the lights.
They don't have techno, bud.
Well, I just invented techno.
Be quiet.
Shit.
Shut up.
I can see this
I'm
place.
trying to tell a story, Dylan.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Shush.
I'm keying on the Laundrorama. It sounds so cool.
Mrs. Coolidge, who owned the Laundrorama, that's Rena's boss, had told Rena Paquette that one of the victims had been killed on their farm, meaning the Paquette farm, in the pigsty. Arthur told his wife not to report this information to police and just leave it alone. Like, this sounds like the ramblings of some crazy woman, right? She's probably off her rocker. Nobody murdered a girl in our pigsty.
Right.
Well, against her husband's, I guess, advice, his request,
His direction.
Rena reported the information to Manchester police. She went behind her husband's back. Rena's boss, Mrs. Coolidge, had a 25-year-old son named Edward who drove a bakery truck. He was married with a wife and a baby. Now, in the days following Rena's report to Manchester police, she received 2 threatening phone calls telling her to keep her mouth shut. Then Edward Coolidge visited her at the laundrorama, warning her to stay out of it.
Whoa, is she onto something?
Again, Arthur advises his wife, you need to just leave this alone. It's not your business.
But now she may be onto something. She's getting threats, bud.
Well, Edward's own mother thinks he did it.
Right.
And is calling Rena like, yeah, my son killed that girl and he did it on your property.
Well, and most people that if this is hogwash, see what I did there?
I see.
If this is just nonsense, why would you be going around threatening people? I mean, that's unless you're just like, will you leave my mama alone, please, and stop talking crazy about me? Now, I could see that maybe. Like, will you stop?
But your mama's the one that's saying it.
Well, I'm saying, but my mama ain't right.
Tell your mama to quit calling me.
And she's good enough to let you work down here at the laundrorama.
So on Monday, February 3rd of 1964, Rena was waking up early, making breakfast. Arthur had been out milking the cows, doing the farm chores, and he joins his wife inside for breakfast. She's wearing a house coat. She's got on her slippers. Victor's getting ready to go off to school, but Danny is still asleep. And of course, he's like, why is Danny not up? And she tells her husband that Danny has a dentist appointment later that morning and that she was just going to let him sleep in for a bit. Rena had planned to wake him up for the appointment, so she's like, yeah, we'll let him catch a little extra hour of sleep. At 10 a.m., Danny awakened and saw that he had overslept, missing the appointment. His mother had not gotten him up. So he gets up, he searches the house. Rena is nowhere to be found. Danny checks the barn, but saw no signs of his mother. He returns to the house and phones his aunt, Rena's sister. Now, she tells Danny that she's going to send her husband, Charles Robinson, over to help look for Rena. When Robinson and Danny recheck the barn, they see no signs of Rena, but they do see smoke coming from the direction of the pigsty. And due to the stench from the pigs, Arthur had placed the sty about a half a mile from the house on the back of the property. So they make their way over there. They find the door to this pigsty is lodged shut. Like it's, someone's put it like a big log up against the door.
Yeah.
So they have to move that. And inside, Charles and Danny make a startling discovery. Rena Paquette's a smoldering body, still wearing the house coat and slippers, is lying on her back, and she's on fire.
Somebody murdered her in the pigsty. You're freaking kidding. This is not real.
I told you his mother had passed away in a strange manner.
What the hell? I mean, really? This can't be real.
It is real. I swear. I swear it.
You done made this is one of your creative writing stories, folks. If you research this story, it's not even real. Heather's just made it all up.
It's not.
And that's why it has so many twists and
turns.
Right.
I haven't had any time to be creative in a long time, so that's not the case. I'm like, what story? I'll write something and delete it.
Yeah, but it's really good before you delete it. I think you write good.
Well, I think you write good too.
So this is I don't write anything. This is crazy. This is totally insane.
I know. I told you.
Okay.
Quickly, the state's attorney said there was no tie to the girl's murder and that Rena Paquette had committed suicide.
By setting herself on fire?
Yeah. This attorney offered up that she was, quote, likely distraught over the assassination of President Kennedy. And that's why she had killed herself.
You know how many people...
Which totally makes sense.
How many people burned themselves that day?
And how many people shut the door with a log?
And lodged it shut?
Yeah.
Right. That's like those people that shoot themselves 6 times to commit suicide.
Makes sense, right? I mean, it didn't make any sense. But he was unwilling to pursue Edward Coolidge as a murder suspect. Like, he absolutely did not want to link Rena's death with this guy. And here's the kicker, Dylan. Edward Coolidge had failed a polygraph exam on the day that Rena was killed, and after he was released from custody, that's when she turned up dead.
Okay, why are they not looking into this? I mean, this seems pretty cut and dry.
2 witnesses saw a man broken down on the side of the road near where Pamela Mason's body had been found. That man was driving a 51 Pontiac. Well, it turned out that Edward Coolidge had the same car.
Okay.
So he's identified by these 2 witnesses as, yeah, that's the guy, and yes, that's the car. Evidence turned up against Coolidge. In his car, police found Pamela's blood-stained clothing. He also had a .22 Mossberg rifle in his possession, which was the kind used in the shooting of both victims.
Of the 2 girls?
Of Sandra Valladay and Pamela Mason.
Shut up.
In 1965, Coolidge was found guilty of Pamela Mason's murder. However, the state's attorney did not prosecute him for Sandra's murder, seeing as how he had already been found guilty. Yet, Coolidge appealed the sentence. And by January of 1971, the appeal made it to the state Supreme Court. They determined law enforcement had violated Coolidge's Fourth Amendment right with an illegal search of his automobile, and his sentence was overturned. Due to the years that had passed, 2 key witnesses were dead. Therefore, he couldn't be tried in the Sandra Valladay case.
See, this right here is why you go ahead and get, for one, justice for the families and friends of the victims.
Yes.
And 2, in case some bullshit like this happens.
Now, he was offered a plea deal in the Pamela Mason case, which would allow him to be released in 1991. So he took this offer.
Okay.
Around the time that Coolidge was up for parole, Richard Barron, a friend of Victor Paquette, had his own theory. He believed that Danny's murder was tied to Rena's murder, and that the state screwed up both cases and were like covering it up. Barron began a campaign to get both cases like reopened and they want a renewed investigation launched, that kind of thing. Barron attracted the attention of Unsolved Mysteries, who aired an episode on both cases of Rena and Danny.
Really?
Yes. So in March of 1991, Coolidge was released from prison. Richard Barron set up a meeting with the state's attorney's office to discuss reopening Rena's death case. The state attorney explained that they just didn't have the funds to exhume Rena Paquette. So Barron offered to pay for the exhumation privately.
He feels very strongly about this, huh?
And guess what? They agree. They will let him pay for this.
I didn't even know that's something you could do.
Are we any closer to solving Danny's death?
No.
You betcha, but you're going to have to wait for part 2. So
No.
I'm going to leave you hanging right here.
Look, I know we're a hint late here, but this is why Heather's been plugging away at this story for days, folks. Days.
There's so much.
Holy cow.
And it was one of those cases where just like more and more information every time I would just more things were coming out.
It's another thread.
And I was just like, what is happening here? So then I'd have to go down a rabbit hole, and then I find myself like down 50 different rabbit holes, like trying to piece it all together.
Yeah.
And there was so much information I couldn't leave these things out because it's why. I mean, do you not think this is a wild story?
No, it's one of the...
It's like an octopus, right? It's got all the little tentacles
Yeah, no, it's...
going here and there and everywhere.
Let's just say there's not
Like
much...
the gummy bears?
There's not much left of my sweater now, as Weezer put it.
Yeah.
Because you've been pulling these threads. You like that? Yeah, you like that, don't you?
And the Bear Brook State Park, the 2 victims that were found there, that's actually a pretty famous true crime case that I'm sure many of our listeners have heard of because, like I said, it's quite famous and there have been a number of podcasts that have covered it. So that's one strange kind of element.
Yeah.
And then you've got the mother's murder. You have the murder of these 2 teenage girls.
Yeah.
I mean, just so much.
It's wild.
And we still don't know who shot Danny. Was it an accident? Was he murdered?
Was it connected to his mother's death?
We will find out in part 2.
Oh, my gosh.
Okay,
Well,
Dylan.
Thank you, Heather, so much for this wild and crazy story.
Yeah, I like to think of it as a wild and woolly tale.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Today's resource, I've read through a ton of newspaper articles, and also I've been using a book as a resource called Our Little Secret, written by Kevin Flynn and Rebecca Lavoie.
I'm sure that's how you say it.
Yeah.
No offense, Rebecca. Thank you for the book.
Yeah.
And I was also her other resource. You know, I have done very little to put this story together. Actually nothing,
Thanks,
if I'm
Dylan.
being honest. But I've supported you. I've supported you working on this for all week.
Okay.
All
Well, we
last
will be
week.
back with part 2. Don't miss our midweek.
I'm gonna go ahead and read all.
Headed your way to Mari.
I'm gonna sneak around. I'm gonna read the rest of the story tonight.
No, you're not.
Yeah, I am. I can. I don't even know how to open your computer.
You're cheating, Dylan.
Jeez. I'm gonna wait, and I'm gonna ingest it with the listeners.
Okay, bud.
All righty then. I'm gonna go put your little brain to bed.
That's what you keep saying every
Yeah.
episode. You act like my brain's just like this sleepy old, like a Rip Van Winkle or something. Like it can only be up long enough to record, and then he's got to put it back in bed.
Well, no, it's got to be
Thanks,
tired
bud.
from working on all this.
It's tired from listening to you all the time.
Nah, I don't talk.
You exhaust me, sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Bye, Dylan.
Bye.